For over 2 decades, the BRCGS Global Standard Packaging Materials has set the benchmark for packaging excellence worldwide. Now in its 7th issue, there are over 6,000 certificated sites across 90 countries. With global applicability and consideration of GFSI benchmarking and accreditation requirements, it is established as the cornerstone of quality and safety for manufacturers. The standard supports manufacturers with the challenges presented by the modern global marketplace by adopting best practice and reducing operational risk. This is why it is often the preferred choice for retailers and specifiers. BRCGS certification extends benefits beyond the certificate. The BRCGS service package supports certificated sites with continuous improvement between audits. By committing to the highest standards in packaging materials, you send a message that your packaging is more than just a container. It's a promise of safety, quality, and trust.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon and good evening to everyone joining today's webinar. We are thrilled to be launching Issue 7 of the BRCGS Packaging Materials Standards today in the vibrant City of London. And I'm delighted to see so many of you joining from all over the world. It's great to have you here with us. And thanks for taking the time out of your busy Monday to be with us. So my name is Angela O'Donovan and I'm Head of Programmes at BRCGS. And I'll be hosting this webinar with my colleague Gwenda Jarrett, who is our Programme Manager for Non-Food at BRCGS.
Hello.
Thanks. So I hope you enjoyed the video which introduced you to the standard, and it has set the scene nicely for our agenda today. So today's webinar, it'll last about an hour, and I'll introduce you to the standard, and then I'll hand over to Gwenda, who will take you through the key changes. And there'll be about 15 minutes at the end of the presentation for all of your questions. So there is a Q&A box on your screen, so please do pop your questions into the box. And one of my colleagues will be monitoring and responding during the webinar, or we'll address them at the end. So if we don't cover all of your questions today, we will capture them and we will respond to them afterwards. So everyone's cameras are automatically off and we have muted your microphones. And the webinar is being recorded and a recording will be shared by email next week. So some of you may have noticed that you are connected via YouTube. So we are live streaming via YouTube also. Now the only difference for you is that you cannot submit live questions. So if there's a question that you still need help with, then contact us on our inquiries email, which is listed on the last slide. And by the end of this webinar, you will have an understanding of what the key changes are for Packaging Materials Issue 7. You will know which of the requirements you need to start focusing on. You will know what the main changes are to the protocol, which is equally important to the standard. And you will know what supporting documents are available and where to find them. So there is a lot to cover, so let's get straight into it. Now first, I want to share with you a review of the status of the current Packaging Materials Standard. So as you can see here, we have more than 6,280 certificated sites in the world that are operating in 91 countries. We have seen a 7.8% growth year on year in the number of sites or organizations achieving certification against the standard. The top markets where Issue 6 of the standard is operating is China, United Kingdom, Italy and Spain. And we have 42 approved certification bodies who conduct the audits on our behalf. So I want to briefly touch on the development process of a new standard. So an awful lot of thought and debate goes into developing a new standard, and actually it starts as soon as the previous standard has launched. So we monitor any and all information collected through the life of a standard. We also review the important industry requirements with our stakeholders. And the process of updating the standard, it starts with a formal request for feedback from users and certificated manufacturing sites. And then we create a working group and we meticulously go through each clause with the working group and we discuss if it's still fit for purpose. Now, once we have a draft version, it is sent out for formal public consultation. And then all of the feedback is shared with the technical working group and we discuss it all again before we finalize the wording of each requirement. Now, in order to make sure we create a standard that is fit for purpose, we involve stakeholders from every sector of the industry. And these include international stakeholders representing all sectors of the industry and from different sized manufacturing sites as well. And we include retailers, brand owners, trade associations, food service companies, certification bodies, accreditation bodies, and independent technical experts. Now, they all volunteer their time, so each of you can make the world of packaging a better and safer place. And the list of volunteers is at the back of the standard in Appendix 10. So I really want to express my sincerest gratitude to each and every member of the technical working group. Thank you so much. Now I'm going to hand over to Gwenda, and she's going to explain what the key influences were to making the changes to the standard. Gwenda.
Thanks, Angela. So we are often asked what the key influences are for updating a new version of the standard. The focus for this rewrite and the key objectives given to the technical working group were to encourage the continued evolution of product safety culture, update the requirements for hazard analysis and risk assessment systems in line with Codex Alimentarius, ensure a focus on continual improvement processes and implementation of systems, ensure that the standard has global applicability and consideration for the current GFSI benchmarking requirements. We've also expanded the audit options to include the blended audit option. Lastly, within the standard, there are also a review of packaging materials, packaging raw materials, and other products manufactured using similar technology, such as single-use disposable products. Although Issue 6 did cover these, the strengthening of requirements in all areas has enhanced the focus on fundamental controls to reduce the frequency in basic non-conformities. There are also other drivers for the update, and here we outline some of those drivers, which looked at giving assurance that the standard will continue to meet the needs of the sector. These include using data we collect from all audits, including non-conformities. Where are issues being identified? Against which clauses? Making sure that the operational requirements relate to current activities, and also consideration for changes in legislation. Focus on how key activities of the product safety management system supports implementation via internal audits, the need for robust root cause analysis, corrective and preventive action plans, and incident management. Reviewing hazard analysis and risk assessment requirements as part of the focus on operational requirements, so you can appreciate the depth of the review process. We also collect and analyse a lot of data points throughout the life of a standard. So the scope of the standard sets out the requirements for the manufacturing of packaging materials that are used in the food, feed and beverage industry for the containment of products, for hygiene-sensitive products such as cosmetics and pharmaceuticals. It also covers the manufacture of raw materials such as films and paperboard used for conversion into packaging products. The industry is incredibly diverse with a wide range of material types, manufacturing technologies and applications. Issue 7 of the standard has addressed the range of products that can be included for certification. The standard recognises that some packaging manufacturing sites also manufacture disposable plastic and paper products for use in the food service sector. The manufacturing materials or technologies used are the same for both packaging and disposable products. Only products undergoing manufacture at the site can be certificated. The standard does not cover wholesale, importation, transportation or storage activities which are outside the control of the company being certificated. BRCGS has a range of standards such as BRCGS storage and distribution and agents and brokers that cover these activities. There are no new additional modules associated with packaging materials issue 7. We continue with the plastic pellet loss prevention module, module 10, which has been aligned with issue 7. There continues to be private additional modules for some customers. Voluntary Module 8, Environment Awareness, which was not updated for Issue 6, also at this time was not updated in line with Issue 7. If and when there is demand for this standard, we will review and relaunch. Throughout the review, there has been a focus on the intended use of the finished product, which serves to allow the site to consider the risks and perform documented risk assessments to justify some of their decisions and rationales.
So, sometimes it's useful to have an overview of the top level changes in numeric format. So for those of you who like numbers, this is for you. So issue 6 of the standard has 316 requirements, and that includes the statement of intent, which issue 7 has 315. And we know this because we counted them. So we have amended some requirements and we have revised some. We have split some and we have combined some. We have introduced new requirements and we have deleted some. And in the end, we have changed 167 of them. So this is a really good reason for you to get a copy of our key changes document, which I am going to talk about later. So right now, I'm going to hand back to Gwenda and she is going to explain what these key changes are.
Thank you, Angela. So here is an overview of the key changes from issue 6 to issue 7. One of the key updates was in section 2 for hazard analysis and risk assessment. There are a few enhanced requirements. The main changes have been the division of requirements into subclauses, making it more systematic to follow. From the implementation of product safety culture by BRCGS, there has been a greater understanding in what culture is all about. As part of this standard, further enhancement of considerations of behaviours and changes needed to improve culture have been embedded. Management of outsourced processes has always been an area of some misunderstanding, so clarity has been given on the definition and the removal of the confusion with subcontracted processes. Allergen Management, with recognition of the packaging industry's place as a key part of the supply chain for food and hygiene-sensitive products, consideration for allergen risks have been included. Traceability, again, clarification has been given on the expectation of the importance of the traceability exercise. Changes have been made to the protocol to bring the standard in line with other BRCGS standards. We'll cover this later. Single-use disposable products, the inclusion of these in the standard has now been clearly defined. Moving forward from the issue 6 position statement, consideration of how products that are made with similar technologies as those used for packaging materials may be assessed under the packaging material issue 7 standard have been cleared.
So thanks, Gwenda. So let's start to take a deeper look at the details of what the changes to the standard actually are. So back over to Gwenda.
Okay, so now we're really going to start what the review was all about. So firstly, some terminology changes that go throughout the standard. There was harmonisation and clarification of some of the terminology used in the standard to ensure global understanding of terms. So the changes were made, as you can see on this slide. Even though some changes were made throughout the standard, they do not affect the context of the requirements. The aim was to ensure inclusivity for all. The changes include personnel is now used to refer to all members of a company. Manufacture is used instead of production to ensure that there is no ambiguity in the understanding of the term, the use of the word. Site and company are often used interchangeable to refer to the site being certificated. Due to changes in the standard and the inclusion of single-use products, the word packaging has been replaced with product to fully encompass all products. Subcontracted activities was always an issue of interpretation. This is now covered by outsourced products, which we will cover later. So we'll now get into the detail. So section 1, senior management commitment. The statement of intent has been enhanced to include a clear requirement for continual improvement. This was a key consideration during the review process to ensure that there is senior leadership commitment in all areas with the aim of ensuring improvements are effective and add value.
So I just want to highlight that Gwenda has taken a copy of the first statement of intent directly from the Guide to Key Changes document here. So it's a great example of the benefit of obtaining a copy of the key changes so that you can clearly see what the changes are from issue 6 to issue 7. So all the changes, they're highlighted in red, and it makes it very, very easy for you to immediately see what the changes are. And then in the column on the right-hand side, we've explained why the changes have occurred and what has changed. Back over to you, Gwen.
Thanks, Angela. A fundamental factor in management of product safety is the culture which prevails at the site, the attitudes, values, and beliefs. This needs good, strong leadership via commitment, support, communication, and resources. Without this culture and management commitment, it is unlikely that the standard could be consistently applied or certification achieved. In line with the focus on product safety and quality culture, some sites still struggle on how to show implementation, so now there is more guidance on what is expected by a site in their development, implementation and review of their culture plan. Issue 7 now clearly includes the requirement that key personnel from the site should also be present during the audit to discuss the site's product safety and quality culture plan.
So if I just can intervene here, this actually is an example where the clause, it's actually changed colour coding. So in issue 6, this actual clause was blue, and that meant that the compliance was demonstrated via documentation only. And now it's dual colour coded, and that means that the auditor will not only be looking for documentation, but they'll also check the application in the factory. So you should be aware of this already if you're familiar with the standard, but if you're new to the standard, it's a good tip to be aware of. Back over to you, Gwenda.
Thanks, Angela. So we move on. In line with other BRCGS standards, there is the introduction of the requirement for a system for confidential reporting of concerns related to product safety, legality and quality. There is a need for a mechanism to be in place and all personnel to understand their responsibilities for bringing concerns to the attention of the company or to use the reporting system for confidential issues and for records of issues to be maintained. It's also been recognised that a number of organisations rely on additional external expertise to supplement knowledge which supports product safety, legality and quality requirements on site. So it's now clear that where external expertise is used, it is vital that it is understood that the management of all requirements of the standard remain the responsibility of the site. So we move now to section 2, and hazard analysis and risk assessment has had a lot of change, or so it appears. But not really in the content of the requirement, but we have divided the requirements into a more logical flow against the standard. So we've updated this in line with Codex Alimentarius, and the whole of section 2 HARA is a fundamental requirement. So it's important I go through these changes. So these are the changes to the subclauses. So clause 2.1.1 now states the need to ensure that the appropriate knowledge and expertise are available within the HARA team to develop and maintain an effective HARA plan. 2.2.1 clearly now states that sites need to establish and maintain the required prerequisite programs needed to support product safety. 2.4.2 requires that the confirmation of the process flow diagram is completed by the HARA team annually by following the actual process flow, by actually getting out into the factory and actually ensuring it's correct. 2.5.3, the HARA team is to consider the necessary control measures to ensure product safety. 2.6.1, the term CCP has been removed and replaced with critical control measures. CCP is so synonymous with food safety, we have aimed this specifically at the packaging industry. There is a definition in the glossary. Clause 2.7.2 requires the HARA team validate each critical control measure, including associated critical limits. 2.7.3 now brings in the need to ensure that equipment used for monitoring of critical limits, that critical equipment setting may only be adjusted by authorised personnel. Clause 2.10.1 clearly requires the need for validation of the HARA plans. This has been enhanced to ensure product safety. And then following this up, 2.11.1, the requirement for documentation and record keeping to support HARA. So you can see some updates, but mostly ensuring that there's a logical flow to the HARA and necessary verification and validations are in place. So we move to section 3. The standard still requires a product safety and quality management system. In many instances, the standard specifically states that the requirement shall be satisfied by procedures, processes, plans, or records. In other areas of the standard, this is implied. It is still the expectation that there will be a documented system in place so that there can be a consistency in approach, documents for training, work instructions, and those documents needed to ensure that requirements, behaviours, processes, etc. are understood and are in place. Documents and records can be hard copy or electronic versions. Some of the other key changes in this section are under the requirements for specifications. Changes made to ensure that there is always sufficient detail within the document to allow consideration for product safety, legality, and quality requirements. There is a requirement for materials that impart or provide functional effects on the safety of the final product, that the specification shall include references to substantiate proof of any claims, including the effectiveness of the claim. Internal audit, it has now been made clear that the expectations are for audits to occur throughout the year and not just once a year. Also, that all activities within the product safety and quality management system will be subject to an internal audit at least annually. The aim is to ensure that the benefits of audits are achieved and information can be reviewed by senior leaders. Also within section 3, supplier approval and performance monitoring. Here the main update has been to clarify the approval process of what materials are included. So both raw materials and finished product packing materials. 3.6.2. There is now acceptance of globally recognized quality management systems which have the prerequisite requirements for traceability and confirmation that product supplied is safe and legal via documents such as declarations of compliance or warranties. Continuing in section 3. Here we have a clarification in the standard around outsourced processes. There is a definition in the glossary that gives focus on what are outsourced processes. Any outsourced processes are to be agreed and documented in service specifications and reviewed within the HARA plan. There is also a requirement for the monitoring and approval of outsourced processes. So more robustness has been added to the requirements. Changes in this section include the need to ensure that you do a trace test across the range of product groups. There shall be a summary of the traceability test, and all documents referenced during the test shall be part of the evidence to confirm the effective execution of the test. Now it also states that trace should be completed within 4 hours. Within the section on management of incidents, clause 3.14.6 is the only new clause. This specifies that sites must notify their current certification body in the event of any significant product safety or legal incidents within 3 working days of the issue. The kind of issues could be a product recall, and this is to align it with other BRCGS standards. So now we move on to section 4, site standards. A number of clauses in this section have been added or amended with some changes. Section 4.2. Building fabric. Here we have divided walls, floors and ceilings, for example, into different clauses so we can distinguish when findings are raised where the issue is, and we can use this for data analysis. Clause 4.3.1 for utilities. It is for the sites to consider the intended use of the product when looking at utilities and standards that need to be maintained. Clause 4.4.1 for product defence. More guidance has been given what needs to be considered for the product defence plan. 4.6 for equipment. There is now a new requirement for specifications to be in place prior to the procurement of new or new-to-site equipment. This is to ensure that the intended use of the equipment is defined and any specific requirements for product safety can be built into the specification. These requirements should be assessed by the HARA team or suitable on-site personnel. Commissioning of equipment should be risk-based and line clearance in place after installation. The aim of this is to reduce the potential for contamination of product. Continuing with site standards. The previous standard saw the introduction of environmental monitoring programs. Now in issue 7, there's a new clause added to ensure where there is a program, then there is a review of that program at least annually to ensure it's effective. This is a new requirement and sites really need to be familiar with this requirement to ensure they are confident in their programs. Going on to allergen management, this was not considered in issue 6. Sites must now consider allergens as part of the HARA and establish, implement and maintain an allergen management plan. Where there is an allergen risk identified, then mitigations for control are needed. It also includes training of personnel and control via specifications, segregation and handling as needed.
Now we know that allergen management can be a complicated topic, and this might be a very new topic to you. So to support packaging organisations, we have a BRCGS Allergen Management Guidance document, and that's available to all certificated sites in Participate or can be purchased directly from our store on our website.
Thanks, Angela. We then move to 4.9.5. These are not new requirements. They've been incorporated as an area for control in previous standards, and now these requirements have been brought together to give visibility on the control of potential physical contaminants. We move to section 5 for product and process control. Here there are a few clauses that have been added or amended to align with other BRCGS standards. The most significant are the amendments made to section 5.4, manufacturing process control, to include the addition of some clauses. 5.4.6, which requires a procedure to be in place in the event of equipment failure and that appropriate controls of product are put in place to prevent non-conforming product release. 5.4.7 requires that the site ensure the product conforms to legal or customer requirements, especially where product is sold by count or weight. This requirement is to ensure that controls are in place to meet the customer's needs and expectations. 5.4.8, where required by the customer, sample retention processes should be in place. 5.4.10 requires sites to consider the safety, legality, and quality risks associated with products, materials, or areas of the site that are outside the scope of certification. So it's important that the sites realise even those products, processes, and storage areas that are outside the scope of their audit can also be examined to make sure that they do not pose a risk to the product and site activities which are being certified. So within section 5, there are also some other additional clauses. These are 5.5.2, which requires that the accuracy of measuring equipment relative to the product parameters being controlled are maintained within permitted tolerances, be able to demonstrate this. 5.6.2 has added that equipment used for inspection and testing are validated, and there are procedures in place for this, and where possible, that recognised test methods are used.
Now, clause 5.1.2, there has been a change to dual colour coding. And this is an example where the clause has changed its colour coding. And in issue 6, it was blue. And again, as I explained earlier, that meant that compliance was demonstrated via documentation only. But now it is dual coloured, and that means that the auditor will not only be looking for documentation, but they'll also check the application in the factory.
Thanks for that clarification, Angela. So we move to section 6. Training and competence of personnel remains a fundamental requirement, and here, you remember, we refer to personnel and not staff or employees. The emphasis of the review of personnel requirements was focused on the intended use of the finished product and the site's assessment of risks associated with the manufacturing operations. This is a change and relies on the site's risk assessment, which needs to be available for review. The risk assessment will justify the controls needed and will be a focal point for the sites. This ensures that appropriate measures are put in place relevant to the processes. For example, for glass manufacturing, the guideline for glass manufacturers, which was reviewed for issue 7 with relevant stakeholders, there are some requirements for this sector and their need for access to drinking water during the very hot manufacturing processes. So we move on to section 7, traded products. The requirements here have been aligned with the requirements of other standards within BRCGS suite. The harmonisation between standards is vital to ensure the same approach is made for all audits. The main change here is in addition in clause 7.1, that all operations must now be considered as part of the HARA plan. This can be as a separate HARA plan or included in the site's HARA plan. The aim is to ensure that all products and the processes for which the site is responsible for are considered under HARA. This, as a minimum, is expected to be receipt, storage, and dispatch. 7.2.2, approval and performance monitoring of manufacturers, packers of traded products. This is now aligned with the requirements of the standard, but does require traceability tests to be performed for these products. Ongoing approval of manufacturers and packers need to be performed at agreed intervals based on risks. Other changes to clauses in this standard that have been made to provide clarity and align with other BRCGS standards. So that is a brief outline of the changes. Remember, we have the key changes document that is available showing you all the changes, and we do recommend that you review this as it will help you in your preparation for your audit.
So, As we mentioned earlier, there are also some changes to the protocol. So when you get a copy of your standard, remember first of all to read the introduction. This is really informative in laying out the scope of the standard, and it gives some really useful information about the context and the principles. And remember to read part 2. Now, the protocol of how the audits will take place, what to do, what to expect from your certification body, the rules of engagement, and so on. Now, part 4 covers the governance, and it's important that you know how and what and why we do what we do at BRCGS to ensure these standards are robust. And don't forget to look at the appendices also at the back, and they offer lots of really valuable information, including the glossary, and it also has a list of all those involved in the technical working group.
So one of the key changes in the protocol for issue 7 was to align the audit options with other GFSI recognised BRCGS standards. There are now 3 audit options. Announced, full, announced audit. The audit is on site and covers review of all documentation and the facility as part of the audit. Under the requirements of GFSI, there is a mandatory unannounced audit 1 in 3 years. If the site is on a 6-month audit schedule, then 1 audit in every 3 years will be unannounced. The blended audit option, now available for this standard and aligns with that offered for other standards. This is a 2-part audit, a document review using remote technology, which is followed by an on-site audit, which will include the review of records, facilities, and where the traceability exercise is performed. This is done sometime after the document review, within 28 days. This is only available to sites already certificated. This cannot be unannounced due to the need to set up the remote audit. Those sites that sign up to this audit option must still comply with the 1 in 3 years unannounced audit rule. With the introduction of the blended audit, the protocol has been updated on how this audit option can be applied. So please make sure that you are familiar with the option. It is the aim that the same auditor will perform both elements of the audit. The unannounced audit, this is in line with other standards and GFSI requirements for a 1 in 3 mandatory unannounced audit every 3 years to provide greater confidence of a strong product safety culture. Being audit ready every year, this is also a requirement for GFSI 2020 benchmarking requirements. The unannounced audit option is available to all sites, even those with an initial audit, but the site will need to be aware that their audit may not take place for up to 1 year. The option has a 4-month window when the audit will take place. The window is the 4 months before the end of the audit due date window, which includes the last 28 days of that audit window. The current audit duration calculator, P606, will be used for the first 6 months of issue 7. Whilst we establish and get feedback on the effectiveness of the audit duration. The expectation is the audit process continues as previously, with 50% of the audit duration spent within the facility. Minimum of 30%, but with justification. This is to ensure an effective audit. Please note that an audit day continues to be 8 to 9 hours and can be up to a maximum of 10 hours, but never longer. When an organisation has multiple locations, facilities that are operated under the governance of the central head office facility, who manage some of the requirements covered by the audit, for example, procurement or product development and design, there is an option covered by Appendix 2 for auditing activities managed by a head office or central function. This hasn't changed. There are still 2 options, and they are a separate head office audit where the audit is done first and every year before the site audits for their annual recertification audit, or the option whereby head office personnel make themselves available at each site audit so that their functions can be assessed in line with site requirements. Guidance on what needs to be recorded is in the report. As part of a review of the standard and protocol, there was a review of the audits, feedback from sites and certification bodies. A review was performed for the number of consecutive audits an auditor can perform. This has now been changed to 5 audits from 3. The aim is to support the sector whilst auditor scarcity is a real issue in this sector. So we will use the pool of highly talented and experienced auditors to continue to perform audits to support the sector. This becomes effective with the introduction of Issue 7 audits in April 2025. With a specific reference to GFSI 1 in 3 unannounced audits, we want to also highlight the point and the actions that need to be considered when an audit has lapsed. Where a site certification has lapsed, we now have 2 scenarios that are outlined in a recently published position statement. For sites that have been non-certificated for more than 24 months, whatever the reason, they can rejoin the scheme, but do so at an initial audit. So they have a new anniversary date and the unannounced audit cycle starts from their next audit. If the site certification has lapsed for up to 24 months, then the site is permitted to rejoin the scheme at the same point in their audit cycle. This means that their unannounced audit cycle is continued and their next audit may be an unannounced audit. The non-conformities from the previous audit will be reviewed together with the implementation of the corrective and preventive action plans.
Thank you so much, Gwenda. So that was an awful lot of information to present and for you to take in. However, we have created lots of help for you to support you on your certification journey. So what I want to do is to spend a few minutes talking you through the supporting documentation right now. So this documentation is relevant to the manufacturing sites, and it's also relevant to the auditors and the certification bodies, and indeed everyone involved in the certification process. So here are some of the documents that you will need to help you get certificated. We have the standard there on the left-hand side. And as I said earlier, it is available to download free of charge from our website. If you prefer a hard copy or a copy that can be printed, these are also available to purchase from the BRCGS store on our website. If you are already certificated to the standard, then you automatically have access to Participate, which is our digital library of all of our standards and guidance publications. Now on the right-hand side is the guide to key changes, which we spoke about earlier. And I really would recommend that you get a copy of this, as it will make your life so much easier when you are trying to understand what has changed between Issue 6 and Issue 7. And then in the center, we have the interpretation guideline, and that is essential reading for all of our stakeholders, especially our sites and our auditors. Now, I'm going to make a point here. The audit itself will be focused on the standard. We do not audit against the interpretation guideline. The interpretation guideline is just that, a guideline to help explain what each requirement or clause means. It offers suggestions or ideas of what good could look like. So we don't expect to see everything listed in the interpretation guideline in your manufacturing site. So the standard has been translated from English, which is the language of the definitive document, into, now let's see how well you know your flags, Italian, Chinese and Spanish. So the English version is available today from our website, as well as the Chinese and the Italian versions. And the Spanish version will be available in a couple of weeks in the middle of November. So like I said, all of these will be available to download for free, or you can purchase them directly from the BRCGS website. And they'll also be available on BRCGS Participate today. Now, we also offer other support documents which are available on our website, on Participate, or on My BRCGS, which is exclusive to our certification bodies and delivery partners. We will publish the Audit Duration Calculator, which Gwenda mentioned earlier, after we've gathered about 6 months' worth of data. And once we've analysed all that, we will come up with what we think is a typical audit day. So that will be issued later on in early 2025 in advance of the audits, as well as the audit report template and the guidance document to help write the audit report. We also typically publish a frequently asked questions document, probably about 6 to 7 months after we have published any new standard. So we anticipate that being published probably October, November in 2025 next year. Now, as part of the Packaging Materials Issue 7 review, we also reviewed the guidelines for glass manufacturers, as Gwenda mentioned earlier. And the outcome of the review, which involved industry experts, also confirmed that the existing document met the specific needs of the sector. So the document was updated with the relevant cross-references to the standard, and it'll be issued in early 2025 in advance of audits starting. So now I want to summarise some of the important dates that we've talked about. So today, the 28th of October, the standard and the key changes documents have been published and gone live. Training for the approved training partners commenced on the 4th of November, and that training is now live on our website for those approved training partners to book their slots. These partners are the trainers that will train the manufacturing sites and the auditors. And as I said earlier, the interpretation guideline will be launched mid-November, and the translations for the standards and checklists, if they're not already available, will be published over the coming weeks. Auditor and site training courses, now they're going to commence and be available from the 6th of January 2025. And all auditors must be trained in the requirements of Issue 7 prior to them taking their first audit. All sites with their audit after the 28th of April 2025, on or after the 28th of April, whether it's announced or unannounced, will be assessed against Issue 7. So all Issue 6 certificates will remain valid up to their expiry date. And so, for example, if you have your audit in early April next year, your Issue 6 certificate will last for its full 12 months. So that's the end of the presentation that we have planned for today. I just want to thank you very much for all your attention. We've actually shared an awful lot of information with you, so I'm assuming that some of you have some questions. So we're going to move over to the audience now and answer some of your questions. Okay, so I'm just going to move to some of our questions that we have received throughout the webinar. We do seem to have got quite a few questions. I'm not sure if we're actually going to get a chance to go through all of them. But what we will do is we will make sure that we create a document and we will answer as many of them as we can if we don't cover them right now. And we will post that on our website afterwards. So, Gwenda, here we go.
Okay.
Now we've got quite a few questions actually all around allergen management. And so that is quite a tough one to answer. So what we'll probably do with all those related to allergen management is we will go through them separately. And what we'll do is we'll create a document and we'll issue that separately. I think it's probably the best thing to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start going through some of the more frequently asked questions. So one from Michael, and it's come from a couple of people, is why has Issue 7 been issued with permission to print removed? Well, Michael, I don't think permission has been removed to print necessarily every standard. It depends where you're downloading it from. If you're downloading it from Participate, then I don't think you could ever print those ones. Those free copies to download are not printable. But if you purchase a copy, so there are several options to purchase on our store, one of which is a printable PDF. So go back onto our store and make sure that you click the download for printable version. There's also a couple of questions about whether we're going to do translations for the key changes, and the key changes document, I'm afraid, is only going to be available in English.
Sorry, Angela, maybe worth saying there as well that the interpretation guidelines will also only be in English.
Oh yes, thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Okay, a question from Maria, and I'm going to direct this one to you, Gwenda.
Okay.
So if next year is the third one with a supposed announced audit, so this is about your 1 and 3 unannounced audits. So if next year is the third one and it's supposed to be announced, can it still be announced due to the change of the issue for the standard?
Yes, it can, and we did explain this in the webinar, but also in the technical briefing document, we have some information in there, if you have access to that document, about how the unannounced audits are planned. But if your 2025 audit is announced and it's before the 28th of April 2025, it will be against version 6. If it's after the 28th of April 2025, then it will be against version 7. And the expectation is that now that the standard is launched today and you've got access to it, then you will start now your preparation for your 2025 audit, which will be after the go live date. So yeah, we would expect you to start to prepare for it.
Okay, a question about clause 351. So it requires us to spread internal audits throughout the year and can no longer do them once a year. So other standards specify a minimum number of audit dates, but packaging materials does not. And actually it doesn't. And this was something that we discussed within the technical working group. So question, Gwenda, what is the minimum number of audit dates required? Would 2 dates be acceptable?
Yes, it would be, but the idea is that after the discussion we had with the technical working group, where it was discussed in great detail, should we follow one of the other standards, it was decided that we would say that we just needed the internal audit to be more than 1 audit a year. So ideally, we'd prefer you to do lots of small audits so you can actually feel the benefit from those audits, not only identify issues, but also conformance. But yes, if you did 2, it's more than 1 a year, so that would be acceptable. But the idea is that you actually find the benefit from the results of internal audit and use them for the continual improvement feature within the standard.
Thanks. Okay, we've also got a question from Susan Parish. So she says, we have 5 facilities. We schedule our audits by facility each quarter, i.e. facility 1 is done in the 4th quarter and facility 2 is done in the 2nd quarter. Will this be okay?
Yes, unless you are actually doing a head office audit where you've got a head office. If they're all standalone audits, then as long as you do them in whatever frequency you want and they are full audits against all the requirements of the standard, that's fine. If you are a head office governed organisation, then the head office audit would need to be first. Of course, if you're doing some audits in quarter 4 this year, that will be against issue 6. Quarter 2 next year will be against issue 7.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Gwenda. So will there be, or when will the Spanish version of the standard and the site self-assessment tool be released? Well, we know that it's going to be, we're aiming to have it released around November the 11th or thereabouts. So if you just keep an eye on our website, but we will also be doing something on social media every time we release a new translation. Let's see, other questions. There's quite a few on allergens, and again, I think what we'll do is we will answer all of those separately. A question from How. So ISO 9001 certification
Right.
can consider as globally recognized quality management system for approval of suppliers? So this is a good question.
It is a really good one because we had this discussion particularly in the technical working group. For supply monitoring, for those suppliers of very large manufacturers of things like resins who probably will not be assessed against BRCGS packaging standards, but will have an ISO 9000 certificate. Now, as long as their certification covers, as we said in the webinar, covers the requirements for traceability and the prerequisite programs are actually covered, then that is actually acceptable for the organisation to assess as part of their supplier management system to say that you now have enough data to have confidence in that supply chain, that the product is safe for the further use within packaging for food, feed, beverage and consumer products. Sorry, cosmetics or pharmaceuticals. Okay. Could also be consumer products, of course.
Could be. Thank you. Thanks, Gwenda. Okay, this is from somebody anonymous. So based on the definition of annual and annually, within 12 months since the action was last conducted, so I'm guessing you're looking at our glossary there, so thank you. Do the internal audits for clause 3.5 need to remain within the 12 months internal from the previous year's audit to issue 6, or can a reset of all clauses be done, or just the clauses that changed of the new standard? So I'm guessing that's for your internal audit.
Yeah, so it's a good question,
Yeah.
but let's be clear. The function of internal audit is a dynamic requirement. So you should always be doing internal audits and they should be rolling. If you've started your internal audit program against issue 6 and then your audit is after the go live of issue 7, then you can roll them over. The requirement is by the time you get to be audited against issue 7, you should have done an internal audit to cover all of the requirements of issue 7. Now, if your audit is against issue 6, there's nothing stopping you starting to do your audits against the new requirements or enhanced requirements of issue 7. So really it's up to you. The issue is making sure the internal audit is working for you and that actually you're getting the benefits from the internal audit.
Okay, thank you. Okay, another quick question. On the blended audit, and this is from Chris Waterhouse, on the blended audit, is the unannounced blended audit a full on-site rather than a blended?
Okay, so when you sign up to the blended audit, and we said that 1 in 3 of those audits must follow the GFSI requirements of being unannounced. When that unannounced audit happens, it will be a full on-site unannounced audit, so there won't be a blended option because it can't be. When it's unannounced, we need to arrange when we're going to do the remote part of the audit, so that can't be unannounced. And we did explain that in the slides. You'll see it again when you get a copy of the slides. When you have your unannounced audit, when you sign up to that option, it will be fully unannounced.
Okay, thank you. Right, question from David. So does the auditor being able to audit for 5 consecutive years, does it start from issue 7 and not run concurrently from issue 6?
Again, a very good question. This was our gift to you, that you can now use your auditors for 5 consecutive audits, but it does start from the 28th of April 2025. It does not account for version 6 audits, but you can count the ones you did, but 5 audits only start from April of next year.
Okay, now I know we are officially out of time. We've had quite a few questions about French translations, so we don't actually plan to do any French translations, but we will be doing some French webinars, so they will be translated to explain the key changes, so look out for them. We also do have quite a few other webinars planned in various different languages, so again, look out for them. We will be advertising them on our website. Now, there's lots and lots of other questions. I'm really sorry we didn't get a chance to cover all of them. There's just been so many. But again, I just want to thank you all for your time and for your attention today. I hope you've enjoyed the webinar, and do look out for more information on our website, coming all about it soon. Thank you from Gwenda and myself. Goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.